All right, welcome back to Real Estate Bites. This is episode 105 here on Friday, September 5th. I want to say happy birthday to my oldest baby, Ananda, whom right after this program, I'm going to be heading down to Columbus and picking her up from school at Ohio State and bringing her back home for the weekend to celebrate her birthday weekend. Happy 19th today, Ananda. All right, so for everybody else out there, we are going to talk about market balance, seller's market, buyer's market, that kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of numbers thrown at you today, but we all love numbers, right? Remember this guy? Remember that guy? He's the reason why we love numbers, right? If you watch this dude and you remember him and you don't love numbers, then something is broken in your soul. And anyway, we're going to talk about numbers. So, every week I come at you and I talk to you about seller's market, this inventory, that. I give you some numbers, but what's it mean? And on occasion, I've provided some context about inventory, but I really wanted to dig into it a little bit and talk about the supply and demand economics of real estate and why I continuously say that until we have a major change in the amount of inventory, we are not going to see any relief in home pricing for buyers. Okay. And so, again, I talk about inventory all the time. Every Friday, I bring you how many homes are on the market right now at this time. And this morning, it was 456. We'll see that number again in the stat line when we get there. But 456. So what does a balanced market look like? So it's a seller's market. It's gotten friendlier towards buyers, but still a strong seller's market. What does that mean? How is it measured? Okay, so a balanced market means that there should be between 4 and 6 months worth of inventory available for purchase by the buying public. All right, so how do you figure out what that is? Essentially, you take the last 12 months of sales and you average them out per month, and then you divide that number into the current inventory, right? So you take the last 12 months of sales. I'll run you through this with numbers. When I looked at the MLS this morning, I looked at, the last 12 months of sales. It was 3,258. I divided that by 12, came up with my number, which was, I want to say 410. I forget exactly. But then I took today's inventory of 456 and I divided it by the average monthly sales for the past 12 months. And it came out saying that there's 1.67 months of inventory available. Now, if a balanced market is 4 to 6 months of inventory, that shows you it's really strong on the supply side, that there is more demand than there is supply. And that is why we keep seeing home prices creep up, right? There's really no other reason. I mean, inflation plays a role. Absolutely, it plays a role. We'll talk and touch on that a little bit later. But as long as there's under that 4 month supply, and it is, as much as, 2.5 months less, right? We're at 1.67 months of supply. It's a strong seller's market, and we don't see it balance out until we reach that 4 to 6 month supply. So I'm going to bring up some charts here so that I can add a little more context and a little more depth to this conversation. So this first chart, I want to show you, this is months of inventory, right? So we just established that it's an industry standard that 4 to 6 months of inventory means a balanced market. So when is the last time we saw that? And you can see here, this would be the x-axis, I believe. You see 2 months of inventory, 4, 6, 8, 10. The last time we had 4 to 6 months is right in this area, 2016, all the way up to the beginning of 2020. Then the pandemic hit, and we have had low inventory ever since, right? So we see a real strong balance here between 2017, 2019, okay? That was the last time we saw a balanced market. So what did that look like? Pricing, we'll touch on that, but if we came back to balance today, we're not going to see the prices that we saw back then. We'll revisit that here, okay? But one thing I wanted to show sellers and buyers both is the amount of time that a home will sit on the market in a balanced market. Okay. And the reason why I want to touch on this is because, man, if people are still in the market 3 weeks after listing, a lot of sellers start to freak out. We've gotten so accustomed in the last 5 years of houses going on the market and selling immediately that sellers think if their house doesn't sell immediately, that something's wrong. The agent's doing something wrong. We're not advertising right, whatever it might be. Hardly ever look at pricing and where you decided to list it, but that's not beside the point. That is the point. Nevertheless, the next slide here shows you, so we're ignoring this blue line because this shows your average, your list price, your median list price. It's the green line, which are average days on market or median days on market, right? That we're really paying attention. So let's look here again, 2017, 2018, 2019, when we had a balanced market, we're spending between 40 and 70 days on market, right? Sometimes even getting close to 80. That's how long. So it's no big thing to see a home on the market for 2 months before it sells. All right. That's what a balanced market looks like. That was normal. You can see here as we're really exiting the low cycle after the market crash in 2008 and 9, you see houses that are taking 100 days on market to sell. That's a median time. That's in the middle of the pack. That's not the houses that sat on the market for a full year or more. That's the middle of the road. Okay, that's what we're looking here with the green line. You can see every peak is summer selling season and every trough is the winter. All right. So that's what a balanced market looks like. 2 months on market was no big deal. That's the middle of the road. The blue line again is list price. Obviously, we see it continue to escalate with this low inventory. But something interesting to remark anyway, that price through the balance, that median list price through the balance continued to go up and up and up. So let's talk about pricing because, the biggest question that's going to happen is, or that occurs, at least to me naturally, when I think about when the market moves back into more of a balance, when we have 4 to 6 months of inventory on the market at any given time, what's that going to do to prices, right? So I've got no doubt in my mind that the next time we see balance, there will be some measure of correction in prices. Now, 10 to 15% would be my educated guess as to where we would see, 25, 30, 40, 50%. That's heavy recession, depression area sort of statistics, right? So I do believe we'll see a correction as the market stabilizes and we get more balance in inventory. But I want to show you this next chart that just shows you that why I believe we're not going to see a major correction and we won't see prices fall that much. We will not see prices get anywhere near where they were pre-pandemic. And this is what I want to show you right here. This one, I got to pull up my share screen. So this right here is showing you, this is the St. Louis Fed and their tracking of housing prices. So they're looking at average sale price of home, S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller, National Home Price Index, median sale prices of new homes, right? So we're really looking at this blue line and or the green line. As you can see, these stats start here in 1963, I believe. And it just continues to go up and up and up. And every once in a while, you'll see a bit of a balancing and, where it just kind of stays. Maybe it corrects a little bit, but then we begin to resume our upward march. And the only time that you really see it fall is right after the housing market crash right here. So these little columns, these bluer columns, they represent a decrease or decline in home sales or at least balance where it just stays still. So everything outside of those columns, every bit of this time frame outside of the blue or gray columns represents upward movement in pricing, okay? And the only real drop in pricing that we've seen since 1963 was right post the Great Recession in 2008, 9, 10, right? And then we bottomed out 10, 11, 12 with home prices. And then we started to creep back up and up and up. And then we see this sort of hyperbolic move in prices in the pandemic area. So now we see this correction here. Now this is, again, these are national statistics. We're not seeing this here in Northeast Ohio, certainly not Lorain County. But that's where we're looking at the current correction over the past couple of years as sales statistics have really nationwide dropped off. But that being said, even in the worst of times, the correction was temporary before we began to climb again and again and again. And I just think that this is going to follow inflationary trend. So as our dollar loses purchasing power, right, after every time that our Federal Reserve steps in and our government steps in and we pump a bunch of funny money into the system to try to support the markets, to try to support the economy, we see this price go up and up and up, along with the price of your eggs and your clothes and your building materials and everything else that we see cost more nowadays, right? So I think the upward movement in prices probably tracks pretty strongly with the downward movement in the value of the dollar, okay? So, or the purchasing power of the dollar, I should say. So what do I expect to see with prices with a balanced market? A small correction, nothing crazy. So if I'm saying a 10%, if your house is worth 300 grand today, if we see a 10% correction in a stabilizing market, that means it's worth 270. It's not dropping down to 200 or 215. You'll see a 10% correction. So that is what a balanced market would probably look like if we see it. That said, when we roll into our statistics and we look at today's inventory and we see the nationwide housing shortage, I mean, the Case-Shillers of the world, NAR, they still say we're approximately 4 million housing units short in supply. Guys, how are we catching up with that, right? What's going to happen to possibly catch up with that anytime soon? I just don't see it. It's going to take a decade at least for builders to catch up. And that we're just hoping that everything sort of stays status quo and our economy keeps moving along at the same pace it has been. And we don't have a giant recession, which causes people to have to liquidate their properties. I fear that giant recession, people liquidate properties. The Fed comes in and drops rates to low lows again. And what you're going to have is more giant wealth and giant money, the big banksters and Wall Street coming in and buying up more properties and taking them out of the marketplace. So when the marketplace gets flooded with new inventory because people are now distressed sellers and Wall Street comes and buys them up and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, when things rebound, there's less inventory on hand for people to buy, and prices will reverse and go back up, and things will be even more unaffordable for your average American. And that's a fear of mine. That is a fear of mine. I would rather see prices come down and make less money on commissions than see less affordability for Americans. I want to see my fellow Americans thriving, okay? That's what makes this country strong and healthy, not a poor class and then an elite class, which is the way we're moving to. All right. So at any rate, that is the topic of the day. Let's move into last week's real estate sales statistics here in Lorain County. Again, I pull this from the MLS at 8 a.m. the day I do the show. I'm looking at the sales from last week's show to this week's show, and we're tracking these real estate statistics weekly. I'm looking at single family residences and condos. I'm not looking at multifamily. I am not looking at mobile homes. So there were 456 single families and condos on the market for sale as of this morning. Last week, there were 85 closings. The median square foot of those homes sold was 1,689. The median sale price was $260,000. Median square foot value was $165.92. That's the lowest we have seen in quite some time. We haven't seen since May 16th. We have not seen a median square foot value. I apologize. June 6th was the last time we saw a median square foot value this low. All right. Median days on market, 25. Now, do those two things reflect that week, June and July, that Jay and I talked about here a few weeks back when he saw a limited buyer activity? Not unlimited, but limited buyer activity. He saw a slump in buyer activity in July. Is that reflective of that? I don't know. 6.45% was the interest rate on a 30-year conventional note this morning in the marketplace. And the big sale of the week, $1.175 million in Avon Lake. Let's take a look at this. I find this one interesting. So here it is. Here is $1.175 million in Avon Lake. This is on the lake. You will see that it is the site itself that demanded the money and not the house. I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't slated for a tear down. Certainly it's going to be slated for a full renovation. But this house is small. You can see it's tucked away here in this corner, right? It's going to be interesting though, because it's going to take some, if the purchasers of this plan on rebuilding, well, they got some wherewithal, because you'll see from other pictures, the contour of this land is going to require some significant engineering and designing in order to build a house here. But, obviously a beautiful site. It's got some awesome features already. This fire pit out here, just the site's beautiful. 1.175 million. Yeah, you see they've got these retaining walls, this change in contour that they've got to contend with if they want to build one of those mansions that you see in this stretch of Lake Road. That's the house, right? So as I was saying, certainly due for a major renovation, if not a tear down. And this is the only picture of the interior that they include. This is the fun stuff, though. These are the things I envy. Being able to play out here, having your toys right on the lake. Excellent. So, beautiful property, beautiful location, beautiful setting. I'm interested to see what they do. All right, guys. That wraps up episode 105. I appreciate you guys joining me as always. Share this stuff with friends and family. If they're interested, if they love real estate, they'll probably enjoy seeing a lot of this information. As always, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. I love you, people. I'm headed to Columbus.